Morning, Sammy.
Good morning. Happy Saturday. Another beautiful sunny day here in Missouri.
In Missouri. Well, is it warm down there right now?
Gonna be almost 65 degrees today.
Jeez, dude, it's been snowing up here for like the last couple of days
Yeah.
and
You
cold.
know, there is no it's superbly wonderful indicative of how we all have unlimited and great potential for ignorance to stay in environments like that.
uh,
When you could be living anywhere in the world you want.
well, thanks a lot, man.
It's a refreshing thought, I think.
Right? Uh, I enjoy, I enjoy my weather uh, for the
Look,
most
people would
part.
say, I love the snow. I just want to punch them in the face. I won't. I'll work a step or something, but I want to punch them in the face. I'm just like, yeah, I've had enough of that. You're stupid. What I really want to say is, you obviously don't move it. You obviously don't stay outside in the freezing, blistering wind, moving snow that you know is going to be right there as soon as you turn your freaking plow or snowblower or shovel around.
Well,
Or
that.
you obviously don't move it when the city comes by and repiles a 3 foot wall of brick ice at the end of your driveway. Now you got to go back out there and try to work your way through that before you're late for work. Like, you obviously don't do any of that.
I would like to remind you that this is the first year in 9 years. Well, last year was the first year in 9 years that we didn't do snow removal
Uh,
during the wintertime. So I did move it on a regular basis. I just quit because there wasn't enough snow to make it profitable either year.
man. Well, you know what you should do is just salt people's stuff because you know that ice is just as bad.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. I'm not
Yeah.
as tired as you, but I'm pretty tired. It's been, and it's not even a physical tired. It's a stress. I'm dealing with a lot of stress right now, but I mean, I'm dealing with it. So big
What
deal.
what you stressed about, man?
Uh, you know, so I know a lot of people think, what's going on here? Why are you not playing?
I don't know.
uh, Life in general can be stressful, and I think people, it's not any particular thing at the moment. Um, it's everything together, all the little things that build up, and a lot of people, they don't take into account how stressful that can be. Good morning, Elaine. Love you, sweetie. Uh, I hope you're having a wonderful morning. Uh,
Good morning, Elaine.
so I think we forget at times that everything can be stressful, right? The little things can be stressful, and then they add up, and then we allow them to overcome us and hurt us. But I'm dealing with them like I deal with anything. I'm following the steps. I'm paying attention to my thoughts. I'm reaching out to you and others when I'm feeling that way. But I'm excited about this morning. Um, and all the months that we've been doing this, we haven't really stopped to read from the big book, and so I'm excited that we're going to do that today.
Well, we kind of do because what I always reference in our discussions is the literature,
Right.
but we haven't made it a point to say, "Hey, here's what we're reading from today." So, I think it's going to be a great morning. This what we're reading today, it really excites me. This was really, while although these were the pillars, I waited to the very end to write these, and I'm glad I did because I can filter all the 12 steps, the assurances, the traditions, um, the wisdoms, the tenets, all of that gets filtered in the pillars now, but it's funny because it all stemmed from the three pillars. I knew what I was going to write, but I was glad that it's kind of like you have the fruit before you have the tree, right? And then you just go and put all the fruit and it hangs beautifully on the tree, man. I'm excited for it.
So just so I'm going to say two things real quick. Yes, my office is a disaster for any of you guys watching. It's in the process of a remodel. So if it looks like craziness behind me, it's because it is craziness. For one, and for second, anybody interested in getting a copy of the literature in a PDF format, DM me. I can forward that over to you without a problem. It'll give you the entirety of the book that we're reading from right now, written by an amazing douchebag that I care deeply about, with the influence of all of us who are involved. Like he took he took notes, man. Every time we had a meeting, he took notes, and he made sure the literature followed suit to what we felt and what we were feeling. And that's a really important thing, because it was influenced by the people who were working those steps as we went. So I think that's an amazing and a beautiful thing. So, Sammy, I'm going to share my screen right now so that people can see
All
what
right.
we're reading from, and then we can get to reading it.
Sounds like a plan.
Screen 2, share, bam. The Pillars of Formers Anonymous. Bang, bang. And so a lot of people asked about the triangle and what it represented. And so as you can see here, at the very top, we have forgiveness, and then holding up that stage right there is reconciliation and redemption. It's important.
It also, so that's what kind of like braces the triangle, right? Like that's the bracing that holds it together. But another additional aspect of having the triangle, and so there's a lot of symbolism in here, and it's really that it's it's a group, and the group eventually will and should always be at the top of the path of this process. And so, and the individual, although he's a part of that, is at the bottom of that. So it's really it's really an expression of humility, right? And that as important as the individual is,
Absolutely.
as important as the individual is, the group matters, as well. And so rather than putting an individual on top of the group, we put the group at the top of this, but as an expression of our humility and recognizing that we're a part of something greater than ourselves here. And of course, the circle is community. The circle is all things in creation, all things in life that are a part of our lives, none of which have a permanent position of importance, because at different times, different things will have various importance to us. And so we have to find the balance between all those aspects of life and all those components of our inner selves that we have to have a part of, have in alignment with life, right? And so recognizing that as a part of being something greater than ourselves is having the balance and being a part of that. And so the circle also, and you can see that triangle is uniquely balanced on that circle of life. And if you rotate that symbol, Monte, you'll see that at different times, one of those words would be at the top.
Yeah.
Right. And so, as I was saying earlier, it's never that forgiveness will always be at the top. One day it will be redemption. One day it will be reconciliation. And we go through that cycle. And so the 12 steps is really about a cycle, if you ask me. So if we're ready, we can start reading.
Bang, bang. All right, hold on. I'm going to send out a couple people that just messaged about sending the link. I'm sending it to them now. All right.
Is this on? You've got it up on Facebook, right?
Yeah. It's running live right now.
I'm going to go share that.
Bang, bang.
Is there an app for StreamYard, or is it just a website, web-based?
It's a website, web-based.
So no app?
No.
Yet.
Right. And they're developing it, so that'll be amazing when they get it up and going,
Yeah.
I've been pleasantly pleased with them. It's been definitely a positive and beneficial. What? I do. Come in. Morning, Lizzie. Come on in here. Look. She's sneaking in for cigarettes. Dude, last night I messaged her while I was live, and I'm like, hey, babe, I love you. And her response was, I'm not your coffee, bitch.
Whoa.
I was like, bro.
That's a violation of the social contract.
Right. And then she didn't bring me coffee at all.
And
I hit her up. I was like, damn, you was real about that. You really weren't going to bring me coffee.
Oh,
She goes, I'm sorry. She was like, I got to talking to Tish and forgot all about you. I was like, man, like just broke my heart. Like I was like,
you
I
got dismissed. Nailed
that's
it,
my life.
Lizzie. Nailed it. Got to keep you humble. Got to keep you humble, man.
Right? Tell everyone come advertise with me on Racine County iNews. I'll take a copy. All right. So
We don't give out free commercials, man. You got to put some skin in the game. I'm just going to say that right now. The purpose
Olga, good morning. Love you.
12 steps.
All right.
Not free promotion.
So I'm going to read the foreword, and then I'll allow you to. Then you can come in and start reading the body of the.
You got it, and I'll help you with any words that
that I don't understand or can't pronounce. Thanks, Sammy. Thanks. This is what I go through, you guys, to do this stuff with him. Like, this is constant abuse.
I love you. It's not, bro. Come on.
So,
Did
morning,
you
everybody.
graduate?
Welcome to Formers
Did you even
Anonymous.
graduate? I just wanted. Did you where did you graduate?
I graduated from Riverside High.
How? If you were in prison?
That's Green Bay Correctional.
Oh, got it.
Dude, it was so insulting. So when I went there, I had a formal 8th grade education. So I walked into the institution with no more than an 8th grade education completion. And so they made me do the pretest to see what level I was at. And they told me I cheated on them. They made me go back and redo them because they said I had cheated on them because I scored too high. And then after we had did that, I took them the second time under supervision. And the guidance counselor at Green Bay still didn't believe it. And then I tested out. In fact, the year I graduated, 95, 96, I had the highest scored HSED testing. I got everything right, but one, I missed one question out of all 5 of my tests, right? And so they kept telling me I was cheating, that I couldn't be that smart with an 8th grade education. And I was like, just because I didn't go to school didn't make me a dummy. Like I wasn't stupid. I mean, but yeah, it was really insulting, man. It like hurt my feelings. It made me feel ashamed. Like, dude, it was crazy. But anyways, above and beyond all that bull poop, I have a high school diploma. I also have several vocational tech degrees and diplomas. So right there, Sammy Rangel, right there.
Hey, while the film crew was here, Julie decided to ask me how many felonies I had.
What?
Right on film. So there I am, like, let me count. It took me like 3 or 4 minutes to figure it out. And I'm like, oh, I think I'm missing some.
Yeah.
That ballpark figure seems a little low.
Right.
Dude, it was about 10. I think I had about 10 felonies.
Right. I just stopped counting.
2 states.
Right.
That I know of. So anyway, here we go.
So forgiving and being reconciled to our enemies or our loved ones are not about pretending that things are other than they are. It is not about patting one another on the back and turning a blind eye to the wrong. True reconciliation exposes the awfulness, the abuse, the hurt, the truth. It could even sometimes make things worse. It is a risky undertaking, but in the end, it is worthwhile because in the end, only an honest confrontation with reality can bring healing. Superficial reconciliation can bring only superficial healing. And that was by Desmond Tutu.
Desmond Tutu, man.
I don't know if everybody knows who that is, but
international human rights leader at this point and voice.
Yeah.
I'd read a lot of his work if I were you guys. I'm probably reading a book a week at this point, and man, it's just a great exercise. All right, so here we go. Forgive any typos I haven't discovered. We're about to discover them all now that we're publicly putting this out there. Every last one.
Right.
I love it when people ask me to sign a copy of my book because when I thumb through it to see what they've done, they've only circled all the misspellings and stuff. I'm like, yeah. You're reading this and had time, emotional room to find a word that was not spelled right or repeated. Man, what were you doing? All right, here we go. The trail of victims behind every former alone is worth any and all effort it requires to honor those we have wounded. While some say you must do it for yourself first, FA teaches us that there is a way to do it for ourselves and for others at the same time. There may even be a time when we have to make these changes for others before ourselves, just like there may be a time we do it for ourselves alone. There must be balance, and as the pendulum swings from one end to the other, we know the majority of its time is spent in the center of the arc. The path of scars that each former bears alone is worth any and all effort it requires to begin the healing process for ourselves. Whether the scars and wounds are self inflicted or inflicted by other people, places, or things, internal or external, the time of healing is upon us. For the former, it is often heard around the tables how at times the only reason we didn't do something self destructive was because of some relationship we had that we weren't willing to sacrifice in that moment. At other times, we managed to hold our own self worth above our self loathing. This diversity connects us to other options that might not be available to others if they are limited in their view of other alternatives. We run out of escapes, options, paths, choices. We must discover and come to rely on our ability to create and form ones that didn't exist before. It is when we feel cornered that we typically resort to destructive behaviors. In change and recovery, we recognize that the only limits we had were the limits of our ability to be imaginative and creative in our problem solving. This may be enough of a reason to embrace diversity in any and all thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that can keep us to the path of change and recovery. In the beginning of our change and recovery program, when we start reconnecting to the relationships that matter most to us, we might struggle in maintaining a balance between others and ourselves. This is a sign of change. In our destructive lifestyles of before, there was no struggle because of the depths and lengths of our denial concerning the paths of destruction and self inflicted scars we were causing. We often acted as if nothing were wrong with our lives and portrayed an uncaring facade of the consequences we were enduring and forcing upon others. Bear with me here. Oftentimes, for the former, our self imposed exile from life ends when we stop trying to outrun our issues and demons. Denial is a mechanism we designed to help us forget and not think about the harm we cause others and ourselves, or that has been rained down upon us. That broken way of life only extended our self imposed exile. The ghost of all we have become has haunted us to the point of insanity, but we denied our insanity and instead projected it onto the world around us. It is only when we become willing to remember all that we have done and endured that we can escape the sentence of living in our own personal hell. The less we try to forget and the more we try to remember and are willing to face, the sooner we realize the only way out of the labyrinth is by finding the door we entered, which long ago closed behind us, and walking out it again and for the first time. The so-called escape from our insanity often is presented to us when we are introduced to the unknown. Many formers are overwhelmed by the newborn awareness of the path of destruction behind us and the many scars our bodies now display once we dismantle our defenses, which have shielded us for so long. Once we stop running and once we face our issues and our demons, or perhaps more succinctly, ourselves. Many formers begin to feel overloaded with self-disgust, unworthiness, guilt, shame, embarrassment, and even suicidal thoughts and feelings. Although these feelings and thoughts may be natural consequences of living how we have, they are not the same thing as remorse. Through facing the reality of our past, we may have to grieve our losses and wounds. We may have to endure long bouts of depression, or we may even have to serve out a lifetime of sentences. But until we are motivated to refine our character at all costs, remorse will be incomplete. Without remorse, there can be no escape from living in the past or the ghost that haunts us there. These hard-learned lessons are how we come to value the cost associated with the decision to change and the sense of urgency we must have in order to protect the worth of the pillars that create the foundation of our change and recovery. Formers Anonymous knows that through forgiveness and reconciliation, redemption can be possible. These three words make up the very foundation on which FA is built. Do we want to pause there before we start jumping into the pillars and just kind of process a little bit of that there? I don't hear anything. Are you there, Monte?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you now. Yeah.
All right. Sorry about that. I had it muted out. Elaine, I gotta send her a copy. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the thought process behind the pillars and how it differs, how it makes a difference in our lives, right? Understanding these pillars, understanding why it's important that we recognize and build upon those pillars, right?
Well, I think there's three components that are buried in the first two paragraphs. I think I have to still write these passages. It's the trail of victims, it's the path of scars, and it's the time of healing. The trail of victims relates to reconciliation. The path of scars relates to forgiveness. The time of healing relates to redemption. And so you can see how in anyone's life, no matter what issue we're dealing with, those are all three very prominent eras that we have to go through. And it's a process and it's a cycle because, every time I tell my story, people ask me, well, have you really forgiven your mother? I was asked that 3 times yesterday on 3 different calls. And the real answer is yes. And I've done it a million times since because those memories ebb and flow. The repercussions ebb and flow. Look at my head. I don't know if you can see all the scars. These are all from my mother, like hitting me with like belt buckles and then not taking me to get stitches. You'll just see they're open wounds that just eventually closed on their own, right? It's things that the questions, the answers, looking at my children, recognizing that they're at their age, I was doing this. And I think the first few thousand times is hard to keep forgiving. The first time is definitely the hardest because you're breaking through, right? It's a breakthrough. It's being born. Being born is painful as F, man, right? It's incredibly difficult. And then, as you go through stages in life, you face those difficulties again. It's like I've said about weightlifting. 500 pounds is always 500 pounds. Doesn't get lighter. You just get stronger.
Right.
Or not if you don't stick with it, right? So, and then it's always better. It's always faster. Getting to 500 for the first time was harder than it will be now if I try to go back to 500 because I have all the lessons to build on from the time I was there before. We've talked about that in relapse, right? Like you're not starting from ground zero when you relapse. You're starting from the base from which you built before you relapse, which is
right.
a few steps higher. It makes it somewhat familiar and perhaps in some way easier, if that's the right term. What I really hope we get from this is how I talked about that pendulum. That pendulum swings back and forth on us, right? But it doesn't spend all its time on one of the outer edges, does it? It spends most of its time in or near the center.
Yep.
And that's the balance that I think FA is really trying to strike, is that between making it right with others, between forgiving others, in the middle of doing that, if I have the balance there, I don't have to wait for one to be complete before I can start the other.
Yeah.
And because our group is talking about victims, why should we be willing to ask victims to wait?
Mhm.
Right? Like they deserve whatever we can give them now. But and we're not saying be premature with it. Look, you got to work on yourself before you start trying to make amends. We all know that in the steps. But if you're waiting for it to be perfect and you're waiting to have it all together before you decide that you want to reach out and start doing something for others, and I'll be honest with you, man, what do they say about criminal personalities? We have no empathy, we have no compassion, we have no remorse. You know, he's got a heart of steel, a face of stone. We need to let people around us know, directly and indirectly, that we do care about them. And I think we got to do that fast. And we can tell them, like, look, I care about you. I love you. I'm going through a process where I'm getting my life together. I just want you to know that when I get further down that process, I'm going to come back to you and bring with me what I can, to the table. I just don't think that it's wise to have a single reason. We need our why. We do need to know what the why is. Why am I doing this? But I don't think your why has to be dummied down because it's too complex to include the other side of life. I don't think so. Um, Keeping it simple doesn't mean that it has to be absent of compassion and empathy for ourselves and others, right? But there's wisdom in that at times. Yeah, there are times you need to do it for yourself. This might be something you need to do for yourself. Look, when I'm, I've been struggling with my weight since powerlifting, and I'm trying to lose weight. And one of the here were my whys. One, I want to live long. I want to live a long life, but I also want to be around for my family as long as possible, right? And I think to me that deepens my resolve. It doesn't weaken the fact that I want a long life. It
Right.
doesn't it doesn't weaken my motivation to want to do it for myself. It actually strengthens me. It gives me it adds to the goodness of all the reasons I want to do this. And I think we need to add as many things that are good as
Yeah.
our motivation, right? Because it's who knows which one of those um, is going to be the reason you make the next right choice,
Right.
you know? And if you only have a limited viewfinder to look through, it's a very narrow view. I do understand though where they're coming from, why that's been said in the past. I do understand it. I'm just saying I think there's also another way to look at it. Not that you can't do that, but that I think there are other ways to do it too. Look at how people ride bikes. Do they all ride them the same way? Some people, there's ways to do it, man. I think it's got Formers has been really big on trying to find ways that work for us, and I think this is what works for me. That's that's really that first paragraph there. You know,
Yeah.
let's find a balance and in the multiple reasons that we're going to have to make these changes.
Yeah. And taking that context right there, like that was in the beginning, that was one of the hardest things to understand, right? Like it was one of the hardest things for me to grasp as a conceptual idea, right? Like I had lived my life in that other way for so long that all of those things, recognizing the fact that I did care about other people and that I didn't want other people to hurt, and being willing to share that, right? It wasn't that I didn't feel those feelings. I had felt those feelings, but I never felt safe enough to share those feelings, right? Like
Mm.
admitting to people that I care, admitting to people that I'm not a monster, that I'm not a Superman or an animal or an unfeeling machine, right? Like that was hard, exposing myself, right? Exposing these traits that I thought were weaknesses, right? Right? These traits that I thought made me soft, that made me not a man, that made me not, what I wanted to be. In the beginning, that was the hardest. But once I had started to grasp those, and once I had started to understand those, and once I started to trust those, and then I was able to work through forgiveness for me, right? Like I found out it wasn't my desire as much to have other people forgive me as it was a need to forgive myself.
Mhm.
I couldn't come to that until I started asking others for forgiveness. I didn't understand how much guilt, useless and needless guilt, I had bonded with, and sewn to my soul, or sewn to my spirit, and just carried with me like a patch, right? This heavy guilt, this heavy shame, and it wasn't remorse, right? And that was another thing, learning the difference between guilt and remorse. I tell people all the time, get rid of the guilt, right? Lose the guilt, hold on to that remorse. That remorse will help you, right? That'll help stop you from recommitting this offense. It'll help stop you from creating new victims and further victimizing yourself, right?
And it will help you do good things.
Yeah, yeah. Drive you to do shit like this, right? Spend my
Yeah.
Saturday morning, instead of sleeping,
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
here with you guys, right? Like,
Mhm.
and we're up to like 13 viewers and down to 1, and then back to 9, and then down to 7, and then our share. Like, I don't even
But
stress it
keep
anymore.
in mind, I want this is what's going on in real time, but this content is what you call evergreen.
Continues
This
to grow.
content will last forever.
Absolutely.
And what if in 200 years somebody's listening to this exact podcast 200 years from now and finds value in it? You're not going to be there to see the screen and the
I don't need
likes,
to be.
right? That's not the point. The point is broadcasting, spreading the message, and you may not be there to see who receives it, and that's the spirit of service work.
Yeah.
And I think talking about remorse has an upside to it too. Guilt doesn't.
Right.
Remorse is about expansion, making yourself more available to the world and giving more of yourself away. Guilt will have you hiding in shame,
Yeah.
right? It'll have you isolate, and it will also have you consuming yourself like that worm that can eat up to like 80% of its body.
Yeah. Uselessly. Right. Like, absolutely. I had spent so many years uh, with that backpack on, right? With that, just hauling it around, wasting my energy, wasting my life, like just lugging it through. I did this. I gotta hate myself forever. Forgiving myself was the hardest, right? Like, understanding that I deserved forgiveness, like that.
Well, let me challenge that. You don't deserve forgiveness, and neither do I. But that's the principle of forgiveness, is that it's given through love, not dependent on your value or worthiness. It's dependent on your innate value and your innate worthiness. All
Okay.
people are like, we all have human rights. You don't deserve human rights. You have human rights. Do you know what I mean? You
I
you're
do.
not you're not in any situation supposed to take anyone's human rights away. But that doesn't mean you can't be accountable or held accountable, right? So it's in my opinion, it's a finite definition, because me and you both know what we have done in this world, and there are a lot of people who would disagree that we deserve to be here, and I might be one of them. When I'm looking at my crimes and I realize what I've done, I would be like, you're right. But who's better served?
Who did those though? Who did those?
What do you mean?
Who did those crimes?
Well, I did. I'm talking about my crimes, and so I feel like, well, I'm misunderstanding. Go ahead.
So here's something unique in the Apache culture, right? Like, yeah, and so we have different names for different times, and they're only spoken during those times. So Monte, right, had a name for during his time of war, right? That was Bigfoot, right? King Bigfoot, whatever you wanted to call it. And the reasoning why was because as a people, we understood that the psyche of one was not the same as the other. The human being as one was not the same as the other, right? Like, we couldn't marry those two people together and have harmony in our lives, right? So the person I was and the person you were is not the same person as who you are right now.
Correct.
Sammy that I know couldn't have committed any of the things, right, that he committed without being his hand being forced, right? I believe you can exact violence through protection and fear for your family and fear for an innocent. We all could, right? Like me, I've avoided as many violent encounters as have approached me since I've been home that I could. When situations come to me that I couldn't avoid, like if I had to stop somebody from hurting someone else, which has happened, I can physically do what I need to do to stop them and then control myself enough to allow whatever consequences they have coming legally to happen, right? Like I'm able to do that now. The me before would not have been. The me before, right? The person who I used to be would have just destroyed the person that was insulting or offending or assaulting something, right? Like, so I dig what you're saying, right? But I don't marry who I am now with who I was before inside.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm the same person anymore.
I think I understand what you're saying. However, the penalty for some of the stuff we've done is life.
Yeah.
The fact that we've gotten away with it or not been held accountable to that extent doesn't erase that fact.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And
I agree with that.
It goes back to when I remember I was one of our formers asked me to come speak at her church a long time ago, and I did. It was like a biker church.
Yeah, I remember.
And there was some guy, an older guy, like seemed like a little, like maybe an elder, stood up when I was done. And he said, "Do you believe in Jesus Christ?" And I said, "Well, I don't make a point to talk about my personal religious beliefs, but I do have my beliefs." And he said, "Well, if you don't, you're going to burn in hell." Just blurted this out. And I said, "Well, that might be a fundamental difference between you and me then." I said, "Because I'm willing to do that if that's the cost that I have to pay for what I've done." And right. I wouldn't just do it to avoid. I wouldn't just believe in Jesus Christ to just avoid that. That's not a motivating factor for me.
Yeah. That's the question I had asked yesterday on a TikTok was, if we could prove unequivocally that there was no God, how would you change your life? And if you would change your life, how do you tell me you have a faith in that God, right? I don't need a deity to tell me what's right or what's wrong, right? I don't need a deity to guide my feet. And I hope that, because I don't believe in a God, right? Yeah. I hope that at some point, right, if there really is a God, he'd recognize that I spent, as much of my life as I could, once aware, trying to make things better, and accept me for that, right? And if not, I'm okay with that because I didn't deserve it anyways, right? Like
I'd like to think that I'm going to be judged on my actions, not my beliefs, because I can have beliefs, but my actions might not align.
Right. Don't tell me you believe in God, but that if he wasn't here, like, then it's all bets are off, right? Like, there's no consequences of hell afterwards, so I'm just going to do whatever the hell I want to do.
If there were no rules of engagement.
Right. Just get it in. And it confuses me because, I don't need a deity to tell me what.
Well, let's be clear. Look, to each his own is what we say here. And
Danica's starting church next week. So Danica in Atlanta had came to me and Lizzie and said that they wanted to start going to church. And Danica asked me if I believed in God, and I said no. And she said why, and I listed my reasons. And then she was like, "Well, should I?" And I was like, "Absolutely. If that's what you feel."
Is that true? Because I don't think that's what I know about you. I think you're using the Christian phrase or word of God, or maybe as some sort of.
I believe in spirit, and I believe in eternity.
It's a simple. It's a semantic.
Right.
So I think at some point you got to clean that up, because it's not that you need to, right? It's that I know that you have these beliefs around spirituality, and
I'm agnostic.
Remember, my uncle says, all branches on a tree, right?
Yes, yeah.
All fingers on a hand. It's the what you call this finger isn't what you call this finger, but it doesn't mean that this isn't a finger, right? And so I think what I know about you, and we've prayed together, we've sweated together, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what we're thinking and the way we behave in that is what modern people call God,
Hmm.
right? It's what European models around religion speak of. But our people had our beliefs that were, it goes back to that principle of how a car works: wheels, muffler, motor, doors, right? But there are a variety of vehicles, but we're not going to say, well, I don't have a car because I don't have one like yours. We have our own vehicle, but the problem is that people are trying to categorize it so much that instead of feeling that we have a belief in common, we're saying, well, because it doesn't align completely, we don't share it at all.
Right.
And I don't think that that's the case. I think we have our own values and our own beliefs, but we do it differently. We see ours as traditional because of where we're from and who we are, just as those people do, but they have different names. Not to get off topic, but Russia are Christians.
Yeah.
But they don't. Putin is a Christian, but he doesn't consider himself a part of the global Christian community.
Right.
He sees himself as the original, unique, superior version of Christianity that was given specially to Russia. Right. So he's like a supremacist when it
Just
comes
like America.
Right. But you see how that works? So he's denying that he has the religious values that everyone else has because his is a unique brand. Like that's that. I think we have to, this me in recovery, I just have to remember that to each his own does mean that, look, I don't use the same words you use to describe more than likely the same thing. And I don't practice the same thing that you believe in the same way because I have my unique culture, my unique traditions. But ultimately, me and you relate to people who believe in God because we have a similar system, but it's not the same. It's culture, it's different, it's diversity, it's different. But it needs to be inclusive, even though it's different, and it needs to be equal, even though it's different, right? All these aspects and components. So especially when you're talking to Danica, because that's a time to teach her what you do believe in, not what you don't believe. It's like when people say, why don't you drink? I think the bigger discussion is, why do you?
Do you? Right.
Right. I mean, and not that I'm encouraging everyone who drinks not to drink. I mean, if you don't have a problem, go ahead. But it's normal behavior is not drinking.
Yeah. Morning, Amy. Morning, Erica. Love you, Olga. Love you, Amy.
Yes, Amy, good morning. I see you put my name first. It's not even alphabetical order. Yes, I love you, Amy. You got to come down and see me soon. Please.
Yeah. And I take Danica to ceremony with us, and she's participated. And I think it's influence from school that she's starting to grasp this Christian belief.
Let them
okay with that.
Let them see it. My uncle goes to church.
Yeah. And I don't find anything wrong with it at all. I used to go to church every Sunday with when Kelly and I were together, and I volunteered at that church for I don't know how long. And the pastor actually gave me that Mustang I had was a gift from the pastor and his wife for all the volunteer work I did there. Like, I don't mind supporting it, and I think it's a good thing that Danica has decided she wants to learn in faith.
You let them explore, because whatever they come back home to is going to be what they chose.
Absolutely.
I walked away from from Catholicism at 17, almost purely based on the fact that it was when I discovered I had a choice, but had not been given one.
Right.
So I was mad, right? I was like, F this. I'm not doing this. You lied. You lied to me. And if I had been born over here, I probably would have been that. Or if I had been over here, if I had been born in China, I'd probably been a Buddhist. Who knows? Like, when you realize it's random, but then they make it seem like it's actually like a divinity, it's like, come on, man. Like,
do you remember
the same thing with James, bro?
What was the name of the Mel Gibson movie where he was in the Vietnam War and he was standing next to one of his soldiers who had just had his wife had just had a baby, and he was like, you're a leader and a believer, and you have this strong faith in God. Can you pray with me? And Mel Gibson starts with, God, I know that these other people are going to be praying for their, victory as well. But I want you to hear us over them because they're heathen bastards, right? Like it's like what? Like the duality of that statement just didn't rock my soul to its foundation.
It is so close to the truth of the reality of the world we live in, man.
Yeah. I believe in spiritualism, man, and I believe in forever. Like scientifically, we've made the discovery that the body runs on electrical impulses, right? Like electricity is what keeps our brain moving and moving us, and we've proven scientifically that electricity is energy, and energy never dissipates, right? Energy is always there. It's a
I'm gonna tell you what trumps that. I'm gonna tell you what trumps that. What I've learned in Lodge.
Mm-hmm.
When we hear what science has discovered, we go back
Ava, to I love you.
We go back to when it's funny because when we go into Lodge and we just read what scientists have just discovered, we all have a good laugh.
We've been talking about it in Lodge since the beginning of time, right?
Thousands of years at this time, right?
Right.
Like, look at these guys; they're just now catching up to us,
Right. It's like when iPhone finally got the touch transfer, and they're like, "Look what we discovered!" And Android had it for like 5 years already. They're like, "Yeah, catch up, homie."
That's not true. That's not true at all. All right, let's go to the next paragraph.
All right, hold on.
The path of scars. Well, you don't need to pull it up. The path of scars, man. This gets into it's the second paragraph right there. Go back up. It's the second paragraph.
There it is.
1, 2. Okay. Good job. The path of scars, right? This acknowledges, man, trauma. This is acknowledging trauma and traumatic experiences. But if you remember throughout that reading, it talks about kind of like what you said. Not only were you carrying your guilt in a backpack, you're carrying your day pack of scars, right? And it's funny because with this film crew that was just here at my house this weekend or this past week, I was going through some old journals that I had written while I was in program, and I was talking about I'm hurting, but I can't really talk about that. Because in that program, and I do think it helped me, but in hindsight, I realized it wasn't the best way to go about it, right? They were basically telling me that I shouldn't talk about my own pain because of all the pain I had caused in the world. Do you see how like that this doesn't strike a balance, man?
Yeah.
It's a messed up message to send to somebody that your pain doesn't have value because you've caused pain. Well, now you're not addressing a source or a root of what's led to some of the behavior, man. I think that it's in addition to forgiving ourselves, we don't necessarily realize that we need like help. Like we need, as much as we need physical help, we need emotional help, mental health help, spiritual help. We need we have to heal wounds that were inflicted by people that should have loved us, that did love us. We're looking at
how to love.
And we went to prison for things that we did wrong, but we were also mistreated in prison, right? Rights were denied. There were human rights abuses. There were civil rights abuses. There was torture. There was, I've spent 12 or 13 years in segregation in long stints. I was chained to a basement floor 2 inches off the floor on a steel cot in a paper gown for 90 days, being fed bread for all my meals by the security director. Like those cause scars, man.
Yeah.
And what you witnessed me go through when my divorce started was like I was experiencing real life PTSD, but I didn't know to think of it as PTSD because I was still living by the fact that I didn't deserve to look at my wounds because of all the crimes I had committed in my past. But here I was as a father, a person who was about to leave his wife, suffering because my family is breaking up. and I haven't made the breakthrough that I need to deal with my trauma. But as soon as I made that breakthrough, as soon as I discovered that and was helped to discover that, I started to heal almost immediately. And it freed up a lot of energy to deal with the tragedy and the trauma of a divorce and separation and what my kids were going through. I needed the extra energy to help them, get their lives together and survive the shift. Those path of scars is real for us.
Yeah.
But society will have you believing that you did it to yourself and therefore you deserved it. That's a toxic level of socialization that I think needs to be disruptive. It's like when honest. Well, no, I don't want to get political. Let me stop.
Yeah, yeah. We'll keep out the politics for now.
What I was going to say is, look, if you cause an injury through the course of your job, you should be responsible then for trying to, do what you can about the injury, not just let the person lay there and act like they don't need first aid.
Right.
It kind of like in your example, you're saying if you have to defend yourself and, maybe you knock somebody out and they hit their head and they're bleeding, you just leave them there, or do you administer first aid? Yep. Depends on the situation, right? But it's like we do have a responsibility as a society to help people heal that we've hurt in the process of holding them accountable.
Right.
That's what I did through the reentry program way back when, was like, yeah, you committed a crime, but now we're at the stage where we've got to help you heal and help you return home.
Yeah.
And I wasn't healing wounds I caused. I just saw that they had wounds, and you could see that they had bumped their own heads, and sometimes somebody bumped their head for them, right? And so, like, let's address that. Those scars, man. When you hear our people in our group who are relapsing or struggling with, getting out of that cycle, a lot of them are just dealing with licking their wounds that won't heal. Mm-hmm. And we have to prioritize that, man. And I think forgiveness plays a part of that, right? And it's a tough pill to swallow if you think poorly about forgiveness, and it's probably because you don't understand forgiveness.
Right.
And we'll get into the forgiveness pillar later, but I think for guys like me and you, Monte, we just haven't ever been taught that we need to heal our wounds. It's almost like talking about that in our old life would have been seen as a weakness.
It would have, and yeah, you're right. We would have viewed ourselves as weak if we had spoke about that, let alone spoke about it to someone within our circle. Like you didn't talk about.
When you got those Dear John letters and you were acting like it didn't bother you.
Yeah. Or you didn't tell. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell anybody. I got a Dear John letter and act like nothing was different. Like,
but inside you're hurt. Like, yeah. I got a journal that says, so and so didn't come see me today, and then I just go into this pitiful thing. But then I'm like, well, forget that person. Then I got others, and it's like trying to brush it off, like it ain't nothing.
Yeah, I don't need them.
But it hurts. It hurts to be left alone, to be left behind, to be abandoned, to be forgotten, to once have worth and to not have worth, right?
We talked about that last night on the show on Okor. One of our guests asked about, what it was like. And it's, we have the same basic human emotion, unless we're sociopaths, as everyone else. Like, we want to be loved. We want to be needed. We want to be cared about. We want to be thought about. We want to feel like we're important. We want to hug someone. We want to hold someone. We want to be held. We want to feel safe. Like, all those feelings are there. We just can't tell anybody that they exist, right? Like,
we're all pretending to not be pretending.
Right.
And we all know that we're pretending to not be pretending.
And if you don't know, you're really dumb. Like, you're really, really dumb.
You're dumber than we are.
Right. I don't know how many times I walked that yard like I didn't give two shits about nobody or nothing. Like,
well, it goes beyond that, right? Because it also goes beyond having no fear, not allowing yourself to have fear, right? And not allowing yourself to display fear as if you feared nothing and have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then to talk about that as an experience of ultimate freedom.
Yeah. I got into a fight. I got into a fight in the hallway to the chow hall in Green Bay Mac. Some guy had walked up to me, didn't swing or anything, but was like, "Hey, dude," and I just started swinging. Right, like had no idea what he wanted. It seemed too aggressive. It seemed like a setup, like this whole time. And it turned out he wanted to tell me that he knew my foster brother and had gotten a letter from him. Like, I fought this dude in the chow hall, no reason, right? And so when we're in the hole, and you know how we call back and forth. He was like, "Hey, dog, why'd you swing?" He was like, "What the hell was going on?" He was like, "I just wanted to tell you, Sky said, what's up?" And I was like, "Man, don't even lie to me." And then he started breaking it down. "Yeah, no, your brother Sky, he's this, he's that." I'm like, "Yeah." He was like, "I just got a letter from him. He told me to find you and tell you what's up." All I thought was this dude was approaching me aggressively, right? And then called me, "Hey, dude. Hey, dude. Hey, who the fuck are," right? Like, we were that dumb. We're that dumb.
Yeah.
I spent 90 days in the hole behind that. For a hey dude. But everybody knew, right? Everybody understood from that point forward. And before that, don't come walking up on me, right? Like, I don't care. Like, I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to jack with you. I'm not going to yell back and forth. I'm not going to holler. You come at me, I'm just going to swing, right? There's no other option in my life. I don't want the police to know until after you're on the ground. Like, I don't want them to have a chance to stop it before I'm done. Like, this is my call to action is, "Hey, dude." "Hey, dude."
It's a trigger.
"Hey, dude."
It's a trigger, right?
It's a scar. Like, and I lived with them my whole life, but you're right. Like, when do we recognize that we are scarred and when we are wounded and when we do need to heal?
Well, listen, you don't even need to recognize. You just need to make the assumption.
Right.
Look, if you're not sure, let's just go on a limb. Let's just take a chance and say there's a chance you've got scars, right? Like, I mean, you don't get to a 12-step meeting of any sort
Well,
if you're damaged and wounded. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
We love you too, Amy.
Love you more, Amy.
I'm pretty sure she meant me first. Just saying. It's and we do talk about denial in this passage, right? Where denial is really, it's understandable. Like, I want to put that out there, right? We always talk about denial from the perspective that it's bad. But denial, before anything, it's a defense mechanism, right? It's a survival mechanism. And guess what, man? When you're in a bad situation and you have to go into survival mode, denial might be a viable option for you. The problem with the real true problem with denial is that when it becomes the standard instead of the momentary reaction. Right. It's when it goes back to that example I've always used with you, where if you were drowning when you were 5 and I throw you a rubber, like a rubber inflatable rubber ducky that you put on as a 5-year-old to help you float and you get to land, and then 30 years later I run into you and you're still wearing the rubber ducky I threw to you when you were 5. There was a reason and a purpose and a time for that, and it's clearly no longer serving you all these years later. The denial got you through what it needed to get you through, but now you have to shed it. See, your defense mechanisms, in my opinion, are understandable in certain situations. Have you seen that? It's a movie. I think it's on Prime. I think it's called Informer. The guy goes to prison. No, it's not Informer. It's similar like that. This guy was not a criminal, and he goes to jail for a crime he committed. But it wasn't like he had a life of criminality. He did something. He went to jail. And then he years later he becomes the ruler of that prison, right?
We watched that.
That he goes to all these depths to be safe, but that's not who he entered as. And then, so while he's there, he does what he has to do to live. And then he gets out and he can't turn it off. Right. And then he's got to go back into prison to keep his family safe to kill somebody.
Mhm.
Right. That sounds extreme, but that is actually pretty typical. That story was not unique to me. That story was not unheard of. It's the world I come from where people are consistently doing that. I did it. I went in at 17, a little scrappy gangbanger, and came out like this hateful, murderous, homicidal, assassin, hitman mentality dude, right? Like, and at some point I realized I needed to put that shit down, but I didn't know how. Right? I think there's a proverb that says, beware the mask you put on. For one day you may forget it's a mask.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's incredibly, defense mechanisms have a purpose. The brain does it for a reason. But your intelligence is supposed to lead you through that process and eventually out of that process. Beware of the mask, right? And denial got you this far, but now it's time to use something else to get further in life. And you got to come to terms with it, man. And it's a bitter pill to swallow when you tell somebody you got to face your fears. You've got to. And we don't see the business case for facing our fears, but I think maybe we need to talk about that for a few seconds, man. If you had to give somebody 3 reasons why they need to face their fears, Monte, what would you say?
Growth, definitely, spiritual growth, life growth, and happiness, right? Like, without it, you'll never find happiness inside of yourself. You'll always be lacking. Like, you'll always remember that you're not who you want to be.
Let's think about it in terms too. Like, that's I would believe that. Let's think about it in terms of somebody in crisis.
Oh, we just lost Sammy. Bang, bang. Somebody in crisis. I'll give him a second. Amy, I remember sitting with you guys in denial that my world was falling apart, just trying to hold it together. The group helped me see what was real in a safe and supportive environment so I didn't fall back into old habits of dealing with pain and sadness by denying it, smiling and partying and drinking the pain away, pretending there was no pain, no doubt, right? Like, and that's the purpose of the group. So you guys, that's our true purpose, right? Is that we're there to support each other. It's what a support group is. So the very basis of this is that support into our community and into each other's lives. Without each other, like, where are we going to go? I'm not sure what happened with Sammy. I wonder if his phone died or he lost. Well, he's in Missouri, so who knows what happened. Like, those people are crazy down there. So, when we move forward, I'm going to start reading the Paths of Scars, and we're reading the Pillars of Formers Anonymous, and the pillars basically hold up the purpose. So the path of scars that each former bears alone is worth any and all effort it requires to begin the healing process for ourselves. Whether the scars and wounds are self-inflicted or inflicted by other people, places, or things, internal or external, the time of healing is upon us. Hey, my 3-year-old's throwing a fit. Let me grab him, you guys. Why are you crying? Is it because your mama's on the potty? Mama can't be on the potty? He is brokenhearted because his mom's going potty right now. So that one works. So for the former, it is often heard around the tables how at times the only reason we didn't do something self-destructive was because of some relationship.
I can't.
Oh, here's Sammy. Hold on. Let's add him back. He came back. Some relationship that we had that we weren't willing to sacrifice in that moment. At other times, we managed to hold our own self-worth above our self-loathing. This diversity connects us. I thought he was picking his nose. This diversity connects us to other options that might not be available to others if they are limited in their view of other alternatives. When we run out of escapes, options, paths, choices, we must discover and come to rely on our ability to create and form ones that didn't exist before. It is when we feel cornered that we typically resort to destructive behaviors. In change and recovery, we recognize that the only limits we had were the limits of our ability to be imaginative and creative in our problem solving. This may be enough of a reason to embrace diversity in any and all thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that can keep us to the path of change and recovery. In the beginning of our change and recovery program, when we start reconnecting to relationships that matter most to us, touch the horses.
He got back. He has back.
Lizzie's using the bathroom, Sammy, so he was quite upset. He was at my door banging and crying. In change and recovery, we recognize that the only limits we had were the limits of our ability to be imaginative and creative in our problem solving. This may be enough of a reason to embrace diversity in any and all thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that can keep us to the path of change and recovery. In the beginning of our change and recovery program, when we started reconnecting to the relationships that matter most to us, we might struggle in maintaining a balance between others and ourselves. This is a sign of change. In our destructive lifestyles of before, there was no struggle because of the depth and lengths of our denial concerning the paths of destruction and self-inflicted scars we were causing. We often acted as nothing were wrong with our lives and portrayed an uncaring facade of the consequences we were enduring and forcing upon others. Oftentimes, for the former, our self-imposed exile from life ends when we stop trying to outrun our issues and demons. Denial is a mechanism we designed to help us forget and not think about the harm we cause others and ourselves, or that has been rained down upon us. That the broken way of life only extended our self-imposed exile. The ghost of all we have become has haunted us to the point of insanity, but we denied our insanity and instead projected it onto the world around us.
Don't touch it. Don't touch that.
All right, Tater. It is only when we become willing to remember all that we have done and endured that we can escape the sentence of living in our own personal hell. The less we try to forget and the more we try to remember and are willing to face, the sooner we realize the only way out of the labyrinth is by finding the door we entered, which long ago closed behind us, and walking out it again, or for the first time. The so-called escape from our insanity often is presented to us, boy. You see what I deal with, people? You see what I deal with daily? This boy's crazy. Stop. Go get some tissue so you can blow your nose, buddy. Where's the tissue?
Oh, I can pick that up.
No, go get some tissue so you can blow your nose and bring it to Dada.
It's separate here. What is that?
Let me add Sammy back. He's rejoining us again. I don't know what's going on with this.
I don't know what's going on over here either.
The so-called escape from our insanity often is presented to us when we are introduced to the unknown. Many formers are overwhelmed by the newborn awareness of the path of destruction behind us and the many scars our bodies now display once we dismantle our defenses which have shielded us for so long. Once we stop running and once we face our issues and our demons, or perhaps more succinctly ourselves, many formers begin to feel overloaded with self-disgust, unworthiness, guilt, shame, embarrassment, and even suicidal thoughts and feelings. Although these feelings and thoughts may be natural consequences of living how we have, they are not the same thing as remorse. Through facing the reality of our past, we may have to grieve our losses and wounds, we may have to endure long bouts of depression, and we may even have to serve out a lifetime of sentences. But until we are motivated to refine our character at all costs, remorse will be incomplete. Without remorse, there can be no escape from living in the past or the ghosts that haunt us there. These hard-learned lessons are how we come to value the costs associated with the decision to change and the sense of urgency we must have in order to protect the worth of the pillars that create the foundation of our change and recovery. Formers Anonymous knows that through forgiveness and reconciliation, redemption can be possible. These three words make up the very foundation upon which FA is built.
I love it. I still
do
love it. I still love it, man.
I've been in recovery and been in the recovery world for what, 15 years, 16 years. And never once during that time did I find it placed and written in a way that I could truly understand the struggle between remorse and guilt inside of me and why I was feeling it and what it meant and how guilt was destroying me, right? Like how the guilt part of it was just eating me away. It was hard.
Well, and here's why. There's a reason for that. The older models, Monte, when they were written, the theory, the common theme in the theories used in the 40s, 50s, and 60s was like aversion therapy. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Right. The criminal thinking errors were written in that same era, right? Dr. Samanon and Dr. Yokelson wrote that the seed of change was born in self-disgust. This was when they were putting electric probes on your temples.
Yeah.
This is when they were doing lobotomies. This is when they were taping your eyelids open and making you watch things to try to give you an aversion for it. This is when the gateway model for therapeutic communities was designed, and it was purely built on intimidation, aggression, shame, guilt. They believed that they had to break you down to build you up. The era that these grandfather programs were written, and they were groundbreaking. These things were groundbreaking at the time, right?
My computer. Yep.
They were written at a time when motivational interviewing didn't exist, person-centered approaches didn't exist, strength solutions didn't exist, intermittent strategies didn't exist. Like none of these things existed until much later in life, right? So the idea that no one has ever bothered to distinguish the difference between guilt and shame and remorse is based on the fact that back in those days, they wanted you to have a certain amount of fear and they wanted you to have a certain amount of guilt and shame as an aversion approach to doing these things, right? So from a theory design, it makes sense that you're kind of sensing that from those, but there's the real science behind it. And those days, the way we're talking about recovery wasn't on the table. This is why you have to stand up even after 30 years and remind yourself of what a fuck up you were, because that's a major part of the theory that says that's what's going to keep you clean and sober. Right. Look over your shoulder all the time at all costs forever, because if you ever forget where you've been and what you've done, you are likely to be that again, right? Like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, avoid a full moon.
Yeah. And
look, it has worked for people.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
The science and the research is showing that it's starting to work for fewer and fewer people.
Well, I don't think it's starting to not work. What I think it is we're now compiling enough data to see in the long term, it isn't as effective as other means, right? It's great for a stopgap, and it's like painkillers, right? Percocets, Vicodins, all of those things were meant to break through the immense pain so that you can handle ibuprofen and Tylenol afterwards, right? So I think that model works really great in the immediate, right? Like the right now, let's get you on your feet again and stop you from doing this. And then let's interject what I think it needs is that secondary medication, right? Like let's interject. So now after 6 years of sobriety and working in recovery and actually doing self-reflection and actually working on your emotional disturbance and your psychological traumas and pains. Now let's stop focusing on your disease and let's focus on what you're becoming, right? Because you're growing. That growth.
Focus on you as a person, man.
Yeah, hell yeah.
One of my mentors who knows nothing about recovery, he's not from the recovery world. He asked me some questions one day because he knew I'd started Formers. He asked me to tell him about it. And then he was like, doesn't Formers believe that a person can change?
Right.
And I'm like, yes, it does. Right. I'm proud of that face. I'm like, sure does. Yep. That's what it does. And he's like,
right.
He's like, but yet you still believe that unless you remain vigilant, you are likely to commit like another violent act in your life. I was like, yep, I believe that too. And he's like, you can't exchange a cage for another cage and call it freedom.
Right.
Blew me away, man. I was just like,
Right.
damn it. And so essentially, he's basically saying, let the lion out of the cage.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I agree because of my life, right? Like what I've experienced over the last decade. And I think we're going to lose you again. You're chopping up. Can you hear me? All right, everybody. I think we're losing Sammy again. I don't know what's going down there in Missouri, but we're going to wrap it up here. It is 11 a.m., 3 minutes to. In fact, you know what, Sammy, if you can hear me, let's TBC this till next week, because we still have a lot more to go here in our pillars, right? So you guys, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a part of, there you go, Saturday Morning FA. We're going to TBC this second half to next week. I am going to be live tonight, 9 o'clock. Pretty sure Sammy's going to be asleep, but if he's not, he might join in. Okor, we're going to be talking about some big stuff tonight, some big battles that we're going to do. Boom, boom. Last night we talked about how we, what we thought the word responsibility meant. When I say our community, our responsibility, what we feel our personal responsibility is, and how do we make that responsibility fucking change our world and our neighborhood, right? Like our community. What are we going to do? So I love you guys.
We love you too, Eva. We love you, Amy.
Amy.
I want to take a special moment to shout out to Amy, man. Amy's been with us for a long time, and she brings a unique perspective to us that's really helped round out all the male energy you get on these calls every Saturday, with even more dominant energy coming from Amy.
Y'all don't know Amy's a fucking alpha. You better know it.
That's with the Roman Greek capital letter A.
Right. Fucking shit. Alpha Omega.
Amy's like, I love you so much, but she's got a blackjack in one hand and a gun in the other. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Don't make me fuck you up.
I take your love, Amy. We love you too. You know, that's the diversity and domination. Yeah. This is a PG show, Amy. This is a PG show.
God, I love Amy. All right, you guys, we love you. Thank you for being a part of our Saturday mornings. We will see you next Saturday morning.
Hey, Lizzie, I heard that you were not want this coffee bitch.
Apparently I am.
Oh, you're gonna pay, Monte. You're gonna pay so much.
I know. Oh God, dang.
Hey, Julia told me this story one day that she had stole some coins from her mother when she was little, right?
Yeah.
And then I randomly brought that up one day to her mom. Hey, dude, her mom punched her in the back. And Julie didn't see it coming. So you heard this like hollow thud come through her chest, like, and she was like, Mom, but the look on her face was like, I want to get up and punch you in the freaking face, but she had to eat it because it's her mother.
I don't know how you have a girlfriend, bro. I don't know how you managed to keep her there.
Hey, her mom got here yesterday, walked past Julie, and handed me like 4 dozen cookies.
Poor Julie. Poor Julie, man.
I have a family now. I don't know about Julie, but I do. Hey, you know, like the renters that won't move out. Like,
right.
I've moved into her family, and then Julie's been ousted now. She's on the outside. Hey, Julie literally gets mad. She's like,
yeah. No doubt, dickhead.
Your mom's like that with me too. She loves me. She tolerates you. I don't know. I mean, you know how that is. So, All right, guys, we're about to start our weekend. Happy Saturday. Much love, brother. If I can join you tonight, I will. But I got a house. I got 3 visitors in this for the next 10 days. So
Enjoy yourself.
I fucking hate that comment, and you just as much as that comment. So
You got any trees that need cutting down?
yes, I'm going to be cutting down lots of wood and stacking wood. I will be outside most of the next.
You
10
know how
days.
much you love wood.
I'm
I love you, bro.
God, I'm
guys.
choking over it. All
I'll
right,
talk to you soon.
bye.